Hi, it's Will from stormthecastle.com, and this is a tutorial on how to cast and duplicate your own little miniature figures, like say something like this dwarf or this female warrior here. In a previous tutorial, and I'll put a link in for you, I showed you how to make a cast of a one-part cast to make miniature duplicates, and I use these treasure chests here. You can see the originals and the copies, and one cast mold is pretty easy. This is two different treasure chests because you cast around it, you let it dry, you make the mold, you cast the plastic inside, and then when it's dry you take them out and you have your treasure chests. But in a two-part mold, you can't do this kind of a thing for a complex figure like these, because once it's set in the plastic is set, you can't get it out of the mold easily. So that's why you do a two-part mold, and it's not that hard. And here, I'll show you an example here. I've already cast a two-part mold of my little dwarf, and this is it right here. And you would pour the plastic in here, let it dry, let it harden, and then you can separate the mold and get your little figure out. So that's it. So it takes a little bit more work to do a two-part mold, but it's much more interesting. You know, and it's to make more complex objects. So let me go over the materials you're going to need to do something like this. You're going to need, of course, your two parts of rubber, and that this is a silicone rubber, and what happens is you mix them both together in equal parts, and then you pour them in your mold, and once it hardens, it turns into rubber. You have your two parts of plastic. This very similar thing happens. You mix them together, you pour them inside your mold, and once it dries, and it usually takes about 10 minutes, you take it out of the mold and you have your little part. You're going to need some kind of a mold release agent. You spray this in your mold so the part will come out easily without sticking. You're going to need 6 little plastic cups or paper cups. Some kind of a modeling clay. I use plastilina, which is pretty good. You can use quite a wide variety. You can even use Play-Doh, but Play-Doh's a little tricky because it gets kind of messy and breaks apart. So if you've got some kind of a modeling clay that's reasonably firm but not too hard, then use that. I like plastilina for this. You have some toothpicks. Of course, you're going to need your miniature to sculpt, to duplicate, and I'm going to use the dwarf here because it's really easy. And you're going to need some cardboard and a stirring stick, and some rubber bands. So let me explain to you what you do here. Take your figure, make yourself a little four-sided box here with no top and bottom, out of corrugated cardboard, so it's pretty strong. And make it big enough so you have about a ½ an inch all the way around your figure. So see how that figure sits in there? I put that figure in there and I have plenty of room all the way around it, front and back too. And that will all end up being filled in with rubber. And make yourself covers for it too, cover for both ends. Like this. Because when the mold is setting, when the piece is setting, we're actually going to put those cardboard pieces on the rubber mold with a couple of rubber bands, and so it stays tight. The first thing you do is you fill your mold, your frame you made, about halfway with your plastilina or clay. And the important thing here is you're going to be embedding your miniature into it. You want to make sure when this miniature is halfway embedded into that you still have plenty of room down here. So I cut off a brick, and I'm going to fit this in here, and then I'll sculpt it so it's nice and full in the bottom half. It looks good. I've got that embedded in there, and now I'm going to embed my miniature into it. And what I want to do is I want to keep the base of the miniature flat with the base here, because that's the hole we're going to actually fill with plastic to make the mini. So you press that in about halfway and take your time with it. Press the miniature about halfway into the clay. And you take your time with it. And then once you do that, you can, just to be sure you don't get any leaks, any rubber leaking out of this mold, you can put clay around this to secure it down, or you can use, put this on a board and use a hot glue gun to glue around it. Okay, I've embedded my miniature halfway into the clay, you can see here. And a couple of important points is when you're embedding it like that, make sure you get a nice crisp edge around the whole figure. Use a toothpick or something to get that edge nice and sharp. That's the most important thing. And you don't want to push it in so far that you can't get it back out. And you don't want to have any gaps underneath this. Like if this leg comes forward, you have a gap under there that'll cause problems. So a couple other things is I've used a paintbrush here to make myself some register marks, and that will help keep the two parts of the mold together correctly. And also I've placed a toothpick in here, and what that is that's called a sprue. That's a little air duct that will allow the plastic to flow correctly, and I have that explained here in this drawing. So you can see in this drawing, we're going to be of a miniature, we're going to be pouring in the plastic this way, so it might not flow up into these channels here. So what you want to do is you want to put a toothpick in there halfway embedded in the clay, so it comes back up to the surface here, which causes an air channel. So with that air channel, the plastic will be able to flow up in there. And I only need one because the other arm is like this, but if you have two arms or different things like that sticking out, you may want to put a couple of toothpicks in there. We will take those toothpicks out later. So this is ready, it looks good. I've sprayed it with some mold release so the rubber will go in and come off the miniature easily, and now we're ready to pour the rubber half of the mold. So I've got equal amounts of both halves of the silicone rubber, and then I will pour them into another container, nice thin stream like that. If you want to get a sense for how much rubber you're going to need to make, you can actually pour rice into your mold and then pour that in your mixing container and mark it, and that'll show you that's how much you're going to need, and give yourself some extra because this rubber is going to stick everywhere and you're not going to get all of it out of the mold. So pour rice in here and then pour that in your mixing container first, mark it and say that's how much I'm going to need, and give yourself a little bit more. Okay, take your time with this and pour a nice thin stream and keep your container pretty high. That will minimize your bubbles. And pour from one end of the mold, right in the corner there, and let it flow over the part. Don't try to spread it around or fill it in. Let the action, the liquid action, fill it in slowly. Okay, I've completed the pour, and what you see here, that's the actual rubber of your mold in the top half. And we will be making the bottom half. So after that's done, you can tap on the table a little bit or tap on the mold a little bit. People generally prefer tapping on the table. And you'll see air bubbles rising up in there and popping. And that's great. You want those air bubbles to get out of that rubber. And then it's just a matter of letting it sit and dry. And in case of this smooth-on rubber, take about 6 hours. Okay, it's been 6 hours, and that rubber half of the rubber mold is done, is cured. So let's open it up and take a look. That's great. See, not much leaked out. Very little. It had a good seal on that. Looks good. See, nice, pretty good seal. Nothing leaked out. You got to peel your clay away, and this is where the different types of clay really make a difference. And there we go. Very nice. So there's our figure half embedded in the rubber. We're going to reconstitute this and then pour the other half of the rubber. But a couple of things is you want to use a sharp knife and do a little bit of trimming, particularly around that toothpick.